Hey, in this episode, I'm going to go into a deep dive with my buddy Dan Warnick on the beginning of film, the early decades, all the way up until about the 1970s. He knows way more about it than I do, and so it was a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. What do you think the lighting should be for this discussion of the early decades of movie making?
I don't know.
Golden, right? Yellow?
Gold, yeah. Or you could do red for the red carpet.
Ooh. You get red at
or
the
silver.
end, maybe.
Silver for the silver screen.
All right, I'm going to go yellow. I'll be right back. I'm going to go switch it. It's a pretty lame yellow if you ask my opinion. But, all right. I have started a recording. I don't have a screen I'm looking at, as people watching this thing might be used to. But I was intrigued. We just finished up our review of Drop Dead Fred, which was a 1990s movie. Like, inherently. Right? Like...
Yeah, definitely.
You were 90s. Like, oh my god, these guys are just nostalgia surfing a 90s movie they saw when they were kids. And I think perhaps the reason they're doing it is it's a hardcore 90s movie. Am I inaccurate in that assessment?
No, that's right.
So it got me curious about this concept of the decades, because that matters. 80s movies mean something different than a 70s movie or a 90s movie. And as time goes on, an early aughts movie or however the 2000s movie, that starts to be a thing. But I wanted to get into the early decades of filmmaking, perhaps the first one, if you're knowledgeable in it.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't fucks with it. I don't fucks with it much at all. I start at 1970. Perhaps I dip into 1963, 1969. But before that, I'm out. And I would love to appreciate and understand earlier film. So, what this video is the starting at the beginning of filmmaking, if you're comfortable with that. Can you explain it to me?
Okay, so the beginning of filmmaking is hard to define. There's two schools of thought. It's the horse in motion.
I'm kidding. I have to do it every time. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's the horse in motion or the train arrives at the station. So the horse in motion you saw referenced in Nope.
Yeah, the horse in motion is supposed to be the first thing, right?
Yeah, and that was a series of like photographs that they took in quick succession that they put together to, simulate motion. So I guess you can kind of consider that film.
And I'm going to
The
smoke
other
some
school,
weed during this video because I'm in Colorado and I'm allowed to. But continue.
and then you have the other school of thought, which is the arrival of the train, um, by it was a French pair of brothers. I forget their names. But that was the first what you would actually consider a film. Like it was set up as like a circus sideshow, basically.
Watch the
And
moving pictures.
yeah.
Right?
It was like pay a tiny little fee and come watch this, you know, new technology thing. It wasn't like there weren't any narratives in movies at all yet, and this was in the 1870s, turn of the century, basically.
Okay.
Well, late 1870s. It was like
Are you
1880,
telling me
1890.
100 years before I started paying attention to movies, there was movies?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's so.
But they weren't telling a
Hold
story.
on, dude. I don't mean to rip off the Doozy podcast, dude. But that's fascinating to me is that a technology took almost 100 years to be like suddenly appreciated as an art form.
Yeah.
And obviously, everything is subjective and different. Like AI art is not the same as filmmaking and yada yada yada.
Hmm.
But like something that started like digital art 100 years from the first conceptions of that is like suddenly where it gets like, oh, we have to have awards for this because we understand how it functions. Anyway, I'm trying not to cut in too much here,
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
but but I find that amazing is that that first film of the guy on the horse running is like, I guess that's a movie.
Yeah,
Sure, that's a
kind of.
movie.
It's a
Like,
series
but
of photos, yeah,
yeah,
that convey motion. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was basically the start, I guess, of putting pictures in a series to convey motion. And we're still a long ways off from people telling like actual stories and stuff. Well, a long ways is probably a little bit of a stretch because it was only like 15, 20 years, but later. But yeah, that's the first motion picture, I guess. Uh, you could argue that it's the horse in motion or
Does it
the
have a
runaway
name
train.
off the top of your
Uh,
head?
I think it's I think it's just called Horse in Motion.
Horse in
I don't
Motion.
really recall.
Man,
And
I want
the
to
other one,
name an album I put out, Horse in Motion, and just see if anybody gets it.
and
Anyway,
yeah, the other
great.
one was
Yeah,
Arrival of a Train.
yeah.
The Horse in Motion was
Double
that
album.
Arrival of a Train was the first time people like monetized it. It was a circus sideshow. So that's the first time you're selling a ticket to something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people consider that the first movie.
Oh, the ticket sales concept.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't buy
Like
it. I go with
it was made
the
for an
first one who
audience.
did it, even if it was for free. That's the first,
And
in my
I
opinion.
believe both of those were French in origin. So the
Of
French
course,
did it.
these French with their beautiful photography.
And so,
Yeah.
okay, where do we go next after?
So
The
that's
train.
the
So
eight. That's in 1889,
18. I'll
87,
look it up really quick. 1878 is Horse in
78.
Motion.
Right, 70s, 78.
Yeah, 1870. So right before the turn of the century.
So what is film doing from there to Hollywood? That's a good chunk of time.
It is a very good chunk of time, but it doesn't take that long actually. Hollywood America, or do you mean Hollywood as in people making films with
I don't even
stories in
know.
them?
How do you go from horse pictures that are for free to the I'm gonna charge tickets for this picture show I got going on?
So yeah, arrival of train. They started charging circus sideshows. It remained that way for like a decade or so, up until about the turn of the century. Um, 1890s. Uh, that's about where it was. And then after spending some time, films I don't know the names of in circus sideshows, it was, you know, um, just basically relegated to that. At the turn of the century is when film started trying to tell stories, and a major player in that is George Méliès. Have you ever seen Hugo? There was a movie recently
No.
that was pretty popular. Anyway, it tells the
Is that
story of George Méliès a little bit.
what's his face that did God um Goodfellas? That thing?
Um,
The director. I'm just tired and it's late. Um
I'll
Martin
look up the director real
Scorsese,
quick.
Hugo. Did he remake that? That's
Yeah,
what it
no,
was.
yeah, he Martin Scorsese. Yeah, it's a Scorsese film.
Oh, so he remake that or
No, it's not that the Hugo's just a modern movie based on George Méliès.
okay.
And George
I don't know.
Méliès was basically the inventor of special effects. He was a
That seems like a
magician.
tall title.
Yeah, well, he was a magician by trade,
Oh.
and started, making forays into filmmaking. Um, and he would use, uh, you know, magician's tricks and stuff in um, special effects
So is
for
that the
his
beginning of
films.
the satanic cult that developed baby blood drip in the bottoms
Yeah,
of
it's definitely that.
pizza restaurants?
Uh,
I'm sorry. I didn't
no, you.
mean to. I just like he's a magician. A magician started this shit? I'm starting to believe this shit. Nah, I'm
But
not, of course, because that would be fucking stupid and a dumb idea to have. Alright, go ahead.
okay, so turn of the century, 1900s. George Méliès. Uh, Film started having a little bit of a story before this, but they didn't really like kick off into full stories until this.
Kind of a
Most of
picture
these,
show.
yeah, most of these were like no longer than 15 or 20 minutes total.
Hmm.
Silent, of course, still. Um, but like he did films like The Trip to the Moon is probably his most famous one, where they shoot a
Yeah.
giant cannon at the moon and
The
go visit the moon
Smashing
aliens.
Pumpkins video.
Yeah. Yep. And so he was probably like the biggest catalyst of the weird things you can do with film, I guess, that people hadn't really thought of before. Before this point, it was just like, oh, well, you can take pictures and make things that, pictures, you can make pictures move.
If I
And
take a
this was the
photo of
first
your
time it was like,
horse, I can perhaps line it up and make it look like the horse is moving.
yeah,
But
yeah.
anything beyond that is the devil. Did they think it
Uh,
was the devil, do you think? Or did they just weren't
I'm sure
imaginative
there
enough?
were I'm sure that there were like religious folk that were like, this newfangled technology is the devil.
Well, isn't there that concept that I don't necessarily want to say where, but certain people that live in certain places think that when you take their photo, you take their soul away. And you're like, well, that's stupid, but cute, and we'll let you keep believing that while we take photos of you. And yeah, I always feel like a dick bringing that up, but it's kind of like, nah, it's just a photograph, and you're fine. Like, I don't know. Anyway, continue. Well, the first narrative story is what year, in your opinion?
uh, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly, but
I
it happened in
guesstimate.
like the 1900s. Probably Trip to the Moon was 1905. Narratives existed before then, but
I'm gonna lean on 1910. That seems like
so
we needed 10 years to get into the new century, and it was like, man, this shit's banging. I love this shit.
yeah, pretty much. From after about 1910 is the silent film era, which is where you get major money and stuff in films. That's like Charlie Chaplin, that's Buster Keaton, that kind of stuff. So from like 1910 to 1925, 1930 is the silent film era, and that's when it exploded globally. So like the Germans have some pretty cool silent film era stuff, like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which was like one of the first horror films. Um, you got
There was that
Japanese
one movie
filmmaking.
that was in um, Inglorious Bastards with the sniper in the tower. Like
That's a little
that.
later
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
because
I
we're
was like, that's 40s.
this is still World War.
Okay,
No,
I'm
this is
sorry.
still even pre World War One.
Yeah,
Um,
but
uh,
silent film.
yeah, silent film era was huge. Became very popular. People started making a lot of money on it, selling tickets. That's when you start getting like movie theaters where they just showed film. Although most movie theaters, quote unquote, were converted, regular theaters. They just show films every once in a while. But that's when you started to have like dedicated movie theaters only showing film as well. They started building that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So it took from, I mean, it's a relatively short period of time, historically at least. So,
And
so you
that's
get your
still
first,
all silent film.
oh yeah, silent film up until uh, the mid 20s.
And what
They
year? Like this is always like a benchmark film for me. What year is Nosferatu?
That's definitely during this era.
It's in the 30s. I always like it's
No,
50s,
20s,
30s. I don't know.
early 20s. I'll look it up really quick. 1922.
And is that American or German?
Um, I, f- I don't. recall. I think definitely European, but I forget
Okay.
which country of origin.
But I think that's
Um,
interesting. Is like, oh, silent film 20s 30s
Germany.
German.
Yeah, it was Germany.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense to me. And people might be like, hey, why are you trying to say Nosferatu's Germanic? But I'm like, it has a bit of, it works.
uh,
You don't even
so the
need
cat.
any audio.
Yeah, the so
It's a
the
vibe.
beginning of horror
Yeah.
was about 2 years earlier before Nosferatu, which was the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari,
Who?
and I love that movie. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari,
Where is it from again?
Germany.
Wow. Were they fucking Hollywood before us?
Yeah, the Germans picked up film a little quicker than Germans, French. Pretty much all of the European countries got into film and more than America did in those
Huh?
early years. But it really exploded in America, a little later. We're talking, we Americans started shipping their films everywhere. So yeah, like this is the same era as Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and so you had comedies, you had romances, you had horror movies, you had all like it just exploded into all kinds of different narrative dramas. And yeah, it was great. The Japanese have a pretty big film history around this point in time. I don't know very much about it. Um,
What
I
year is
should learn
this?
more about it. Uh, like
Decade.
1920 ish,
1920. Okay.
20 to 20. Uh, okay, so the now we can start going on, I guess,
Yeah.
because it's kind of important to mention. 1927 was the first talking picture
Oh.
with the jazz singer. Was the first
Okay. Yeah. The jazz
movie with
singer. I
sound.
remember that.
Yeah. So movies that modern, movies that talk about that era that you could watch to learn a little bit about, like, is Singing in the Rain, is about, or oh, it was called The Artist, which was a kind of a artistic film from 2011 that talks about this era
Oh
where
yeah, yeah. Silent
you go
film
from
era.
silent films to talking films.
Hmm. That won
And
Best
that's
Picture
when
that year.
it did. I didn't know that.
I'm
Huh.
pretty sure it did.
It was pretty good. I do
2011.
like The Artist. Yep. Um so yeah, that's when you start getting into talking pictures. Movies are still huge. I mean, from about 1920 to 19 40s 50s, it's
Where do you
everybody
think the
goes to the
big
movies.
change, where the big shift is, where it becomes such an American thing?
That would be with people like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. That's when
That's
major
when
films,
30s,
19
20s,
20s, late
20s.
late 20s,
Okay.
mid to late 20s. That's when America started cranking out films and shipping them all over and selling them. There's a lot of film from this era that is just gone because after you showed a film, nobody really thought anybody would ever want to see it again. So a lot of films just like stayed in the basements of, you know, um, movie theaters and stuff, and went to waste. So
Hmm.
a lot like I think it's like 80% or something of the films that were made from like 1910 to like 1925 are just gone. So that's why it's so amazing when we actually find films from this era that are decent enough to even still watch,
Yeah. Yeah,
because they're just
that's a
gone,
great point. At this
lost to
moment,
history.
I think going into the 30s is a good breaking point. I'm going to use the restroom,
Okay, sounds good.
and I'll be right back. I'm back.
Okay,
1930s.
I'm gonna go back just a hair
Okay.
because I should mention Metropolis.
That is
I
a
don't know if
movie
you,
I've heard of.
yeah, um, it was a movie where they started like putting lots of money and stuff into things, and it's also probably one of the first, if
Can
not
I go
first.
back a little bit even there?
Sure, yeah.
Do you know the moment where cuz it starts with the US government, right?
What do you
Like
mean?
they're like, "Oh, this is a worthwhile endeavor." And they start investing in Hollywood, or is that much later? Is this just a
Um,
pure
I don't really
business like
know.
thing? Like
I think this is
this is
all
just
pure
beneficial business
business.
wise.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to clarify that because there was clearly a moment where the United States government was like, "Oh, US military propaganda, we can
Oh yeah, that's a little
totally
later.
fucking sell this shit."
Oh yeah, they definitely get into that later.
Okay.
I mean, they're still involved, but that's another story.
Of course they are. Of course. It's a source of money.
Um, but yeah, Metropolis is just notable because it was like a big movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the first science fiction things put on film. Certainly not the first in the genre of science fiction, but the first film.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a whole lot more like artistic and like people with visions of telling grand stories. Before this it was just like, oh, we got some romances and some comedies and the Charlie Chaplin kind of
This is
thing.
how you might achieve a lady.
Yeah.
You're like, no, this is about none of that.
And 30s. Okay, this is
Yeah.
where it gets pretty damn interesting. So we started getting talking pictures.
It better
Not all
be.
of them
I'm
Not all of
kidding.
them were at first. 1927, first
Mm-hmm.
talking picture. After that, more talking pictures were made, but they were still making silent films as well at the same time. But it just slowly crept into every movie as a talking picture now because that's the next new thing. And it was really expensive for movie theaters to like format to get the equipment to play talking pictures. So significant investment kind of slowed that down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, okay. So getting into the 30s. Um Basically this is kind of an era of film that I don't enjoy that much, but it's still
Is that
pretty
the
interesting.
golden era?
No, golden era is 40s,
Oh, okay.
40s, 50s.
Yeah, okay.
But this is kind of the start of the golden era. This is when you start getting the major film companies like MGM and Paramount and all these big
These
companies
child
competing
sex
against each other.
rings
Yes.
sucking up blood
This is
to
this is when Hollywood, the
keep.
evil Hollywood, is
This is where
created.
it was established, where actresses
Yep.
and actors feast on the
Late 20s,
child
early
blood.
30s.
Okay, good.
And then you start getting into like major movies that you've definitely heard of. So, 1939, I think. No. Um, night.
Oh, oh.
Yeah, yeah. 19. I just looked it up. Sorry. 1939, Wizard of Oz, first color movie.
Yeah. Motherfucking
Huge.
1939, beginning of World War II, and Wizard of Oz. Let's go.
So, color and movie, huge, amazing, blew people's minds. Fucking,
Okay,
they were
let's slow down
crazy
right
about.
here. Let's. Oh, hold on. Hold on, dude. Imagine that. You're like just some fucking 18-year-old, and like, oh, World War II is just starting, and then movies are color now.
Yep,
Like, how fucking wild is that?
it must have been a crazy time.
You're just like, I guess shit's just gonna fall apart and collapse. Because this shit's so insane. How the fuck did you get color out of pictures? And Germany just thinks they can destroy the whole world? Like, what? But,
Yeah,
you find a way to move on and find it quaint. I
and
had to point it out a little bit.
it in this era too. I mean, from like, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
had Hollywood stars in the 20s like Charlie Chaplin, but like the major celebrity Hollywood stars and like gossip magazines and stuff about the Hollywood actors and actresses. That was
Mm.
a huge thing
Yeah.
in, late 20s, 30s into late 30s. And yeah, yeah, then you get Wizard of Oz, which blew everybody's fucking mind. And then you get like uh Clark Gable films, you know, like a lot of romances, a lot of
So around
um
that time, like, how much weight do you think Clark Gable has?
oh, he was a god.
It's
Everybody
like
knows who Clark
Clark
Gable is.
Gable's gonna go have lunch with Hitler. You'd be like, whoa. Like, but it wouldn't be this silly bullshit now, like where Elon Musk is considering having Trump come back to Twitter. Like, they want it to mean that much, but it doesn't mean that much.
No.
At least in my opinion. I don't mean to modernize shit, but that's how I do. I
Oh,
don't mean to get in the way.
also, I didn't talk about
1939,
this
though.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
color.
I didn't talk about this earlier, but 1928 was like the first cartoon.
Ah, whatever. Who gives a fuck about cartoons? They don't
If
have
if
any
we want to talk
impact on
about
anything.
animation,
Animation? What has that ever been good?
and yeah, Disney obviously heavily involved in the creation of cartoons and stuff. A lot of cartoons were played
When was
before movies.
Sleeping Beauty?
I don't know, a little later.
That was after 1939?
Oh yeah, the
40s?
first uh,
So.
the first major like Disney success was Snow White.
But, like, I remember Snow White being a thing because of the color.
Yeah, well, it was a
Like,
lot
they
easier to
were
get
like,
color
oh,
in
we'll
the
make these
animation.
two, or these three, like fairies, very distinct colors, and they do colorific things. And it's very simple by today's standards, but you're like, oh yeah, the blue one. The blue one does blue things.
Yeah.
And it's just nice.
Supposedly, I don't know how true this is or not. I mean, I just read it on the internet somewhere, but apparently Hitler
Oh
loved
no.
the movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Of course, yeah, I've heard that before. And of
But yeah,
course
that
he
was
did. A bunch of simps coming up to like take a shoe from some blonde
yeah,
lady. That sounds like
that was
Hitler to
late.
me.
That was late 30s too. 37 was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Animation existed before that, but that was like the first major full motion picture movie that was
But
animated.
did animation have color before live action color?
I don't know
I feel like it would, just inherently. It'd be
because
easier to do.
Wizard of Oz was the first color movie. So I guess yeah, 1937 was Wizard of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which
Yeah,
was in
so you
color.
see a red apple. Like, oh
I just
shit.
don't. Yeah, I
Like,
don't know if before that it existed though.
I'm
I don't
gonna
know.
assume, and obviously anybody who gives enough fucks to respond to a video that we're recording right now, then educate us. But yeah, it might be the red apple. Like that's the
I don't
kind of
know.
the moment of like, oh, color, and you're just like shit. But anyway, let's move beyond this because
Okay,
it's
so yeah,
always a sticking point in the 30s. Is like like fucking Wizard of Oz and and Disney, and you kind of get caught up
yeah,
in it.
that's when it gets pretty big. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean it was big before this, but that's when it becomes like really, really major.
doing some fucking Avatar shit.
Yeah,
3D, like,
blowing
oh
people's
my god,
minds.
what? Yeah.
Also, probably should mention the Great Depression. Movies did
I don't know if
fantastically.
you need to. Why would should we remember that?
Movies did great during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And still, like to this day, movies are
Entertainment
pretty
did
recession
amazing
proof. Hmm.
across the board as far as if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So, yeah, films survived the Great Depression real, real well. But anyway, past the 30s, we're, 39 Wizard of Oz color picture. You got some Disney stuff going on in there. You got major Hollywood stars like Clark Gable and stuff and doing Gone with the Wind. And then,
Yeah.
okay, 40s.
Mm.
40s to the mid 50s, the golden age of film. Tons of movies come out. It's insane
I'm
how many
sorry
movies
to,
come out.
and I gotta cut you off again.
Hmm.
But out of all these decades, do you have a favorite?
Depends on what you mean by favorite. I really
Before
like
before the
the
70s, Like,
Before
is
the 70s,
before the 70s, what
I
decade do you like the best?
um from 1920 to 1930, I like to watch those films mainly for they were inventing things. Like
It's
this was the
more of
first time
the
it,
alchemy of it
it
all.
yeah, like they are
Okay,
figuring out all of these different things during that
I can
era.
respect that.
I'm not a big fan of the 30s to about the mid 40s. I mean, there's a lot of
As far
notable
as
cool stuff.
storytelling is concerned,
Yeah, I just don't really care much for it.
what decade? 60s, 50s, 40s?
Uh, 50s, yeah, probably the 50s
Really?
is
Okay.
probably where the most good movies are,
Okay.
before modern film,
Cuz
which would be like the
I'm
70s
always
on,
going to be more on
60s,
the
70s on.
cinematography storytelling side of things.
Hmm.
Like, what's the story? And yeah, there's some like fundamental, some fun film stuff going on, but early on, yeah, you do look at it different. You look at it as like they're figuring it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway,
Okay.
1940. Where are we at?
1940,
1940.
about, yeah,
Okay.
1940 to 50, mid 50. Golden era film. So many movies are produced. This is, World War II era.
Mm-hmm.
Some films kind of got slowed down by World War II. Weren't as many movies
What?
being made. A lot of people went to war, so like a lot of the actors did.
People
Mm.
participated in war back then? Wow.
But yeah, I mean, they were still making quite a lot of films. Um, my my grandparents actually owned a movie theater,
Yeah,
and my
that's.
mom grew up in working in that movie theater, so I have
Do
a
you
lot
think
of
that's why you're so into
familial
movies?
ties. Probably.
That
I mean,
makes
it's always
sense.
been kind of a part of my life.
I could get into my
But
thing later, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so yeah, golden era film. You got um, all the people that everybody's heard of, like Abbott and Costello, and Humphrey Bogart, and
Mm-hmm.
Fred Astaire, and Cab Calloway. And they were making musicals. They were making slapstick movies. They were making gangster films. They were making science fiction. They were making monster features. All kinds of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, probably why it's the golden era of film, because so many movies were coming out all of the time. And I mean, it kind of this is where it transitions into modern film, basically, is just continuing on this ball rolling from the 40s and 50s.
Mm-hmm. So before you keep moving forward, what do you think the biggest revolutions in film were from the beginning of movie making, The Man on the Horse, to the 40s? The color
The
revolution is one.
Yeah, Wizard of Oz,
Um,
pretty major.
Animation, it's got to be an aspect.
Animation, it's a definitely an aspect, but it's kind of animation almost has its own
It's
history.
almost its own thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
but do you feel like the
Before,
narratives or storytelling has been too different from the beginning to the 40s?
uh, I
Script
mean,
writing, acting,
it,
anything along those lines?
it, j- well, the acting in the silent film era was all very based on
It had
stage
to
play,
communicate.
you know?
Yeah, it had to
Yeah,
communicate as like a stage play with
lots of,
no words.
and it was all pretty hard to make out on film because the film wasn't so great. So you have a lot of play with like light and dark because that's all they have. So lots of heavy like eye makeup, black makeup, that kind of thing. So you could just like see what their facial expressions were and stuff.
So do you feel like you've seen more 40s films, 30s films? Do you think that there was any, like, did they ever subdue it much from the stage? Like, where I have to make sure I project my phrasing. Every word that is on the script, this is what I read, and I project it. Like,
Well, I mean,
where's the moment where
even
they, like, it's a little more like soft spoken, like a human would do.
you start getting some of that in the mid 40s to the late 50s, more subtlety in
Yeah.
acting. I mean, that's when they first kind of realized you don't have, this isn't a stage play, this is a film. They're
Isn't
different.
isn't
Yeah.
that a big moment with what's his face? The sexy guy that got fat for the island of Dr. Moreau. What's his name?
Um,
Big ass actor. I just can't think of his name. Um, uh, Johnny Depp loves him.
mm,
Uh, the guy swinging on the set in the island of Dr. Moreau. And he's in Apocalypse Now.
um,
Marlon Brando. There it is.
yes. Okay.
Marlon Brando. There's a scene that I always hear people reference. I've never seen it myself, which is like Stella, Stella, and he says it softly, I think. And is that an example of that?
Um,
Like an
Sorta,
actor's
yeah.
talking softly, where you're like, oh, that's kind of human,
I mean,
rather than
that's an
acted.
example of it, but it's not like the
But that was probably
early.
60 something else.
Yeah,
I'm like still like too far ahead of myself. I apologize.
yeah, you are probably, yeah. Um, so like uh, maybe a good example of um more subtle acting would be like noir films, although they did do some of those, more stagey overacting things. Noir
And
films
that's
kind of
pretty
dialed
30s,
it down a
right?
little bit. Yeah, 40s.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, 45-ish, 50s, early 50s. Um, so yeah, like probably one of my favorites from this era is like Humphrey Bogart films. I love Humphrey Bogart.
Why do you
Um,
love him?
I have no idea.
Couldn't articulate it.
Couldn't articulate it.
Okay.
He's so suave. I don't know.
Hey, there enough. That's enough. Suave motherfucker.
No.
Okay.
Uh, but there's so many things that we could go into in the 40s and 50s. Like,
Okay. We could do a deep
um,
dive there later
yeah,
after we
yeah,
watch some.
Hitchcock and stuff, and all of the
Does
evolutions
genre
of
start
film.
to arise here?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
Like,
genre
oh,
existed
horror,
before that,
sci-fi.
but
But yeah, but
yeah,
like
definitely.
really coming into their
Yeah,
own.
yeah. There were a hell of a lot of romances and war pictures during
Makes
this time.
sense. It's
But
probably
yeah,
what
I
you
mean
need.
yeah, they had genre film before this, but this is when genres of movies came out all the time. Like you could go see a comedy movie or a romance movie, and they were both playing in the theaters.
You'd see them together and catch the news.
um, yeah, yeah. Eh,
So, what's the biggest
So,
difference between the 40s and 50s to you?
uh, I don't know. I don't really like a lot of the movies from the 40s until like the late 40s.
Yeah.
50s are a lot more interesting. It's just the quality got a lot better. The money they started putting into movies got a lot more. The just I don't know, the effort and quality seemed to drastically rise.
Well, the reason I wonder about that is one of my favorite books is It by Stephen King.
Mm,
And the crux of that movie that I think a lot of people ignore is that what each kid is afraid of is like 1950s horror film creatures.
yeah,
The
yeah,
creature
there were a lot of
features,
creature
the
features. Yeah,
Wolfman, the Mummy.
Universal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Universal Pictures did a lot of those.
And so in the 40s, was there much of that and it just wasn't as good? Or was it like the
Uh,
50s finally started to like, oh, these are comedies, these are horror, this is a creature feature, this is a musical. Like, were they
yeah,
dividing it up better?
yeah. I mean, you even had that in like the 30s, but the 40s, you had lots of different genre stuff.
It
So
just got
like,
refined over 20 years.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. But like genre films like creature features, yeah, definitely became a thing. And yeah,
All right. So you talk about early 40s not being as into it, late 40s into the 50s. Like, clearly, art
it
isn't
just got better.
defined by the numbers. It's not
Yeah,
cut and dry 40 to 50s. We talked about that earlier with the movie we watched, where there's that weird section in the late 80s to early 90s. It's almost like its own thing. Um,
yeah.
is there a thing at the end of the 50s, into the 60s that you feel, or do you feel like a cut and dry thing from 50s to 60s?
Uh, I don't know what it is about the 60s, but I just don't like them. Like there wasn't a whole lot that was great. This is when TV started becoming popular too, is in the 60s. So maybe that kind of detracted from the way films were made. I don't know.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be able to put my finger on it.
Nothing.
In the 50s, most people didn't have a TV. Almost nobody did.
Yeah.
60s is when people started getting them. So
So
in the
movies
50s, the
suffered.
films, yeah, I think TV harmed the quality of movies because in the 50s, you had to go to the movies and, it was more um, designed to entertain in that one sitting. You sit, you watch the movie, it's good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But once you get into TVs, 60s, 70s, it people didn't see the point in going to the movies. I don't think you got a TV at home.
And movies hadn't caught up to like providing a thing that would be separate from TV yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Because 70s
I don't.
movies might be my favorite era of movie
Yeah,
making. Is like so wildly creative, but perhaps it took a decade of being like put out. Like, yeah, you ain't the main motherfucker no more. People want to watch
another
this,
interesting.
and you're just like,
Yeah,
hmm. And so like they all adjusted and made some wild shit.
yeah. Another interesting thing that happens in like the 60s
Mm-hmm.
is the technology became cheap enough for like your regular Joes to get. Like you could get a camera like a Super 8. start making films.
Well, that's what Easy Rider. I've never watched it.
Hmm.
Easy Rider is well regarded as like the hippie low
Yeah,
budget film where it's like, yeah, just a couple of fucking young bucks making a movie.
yeah. I mean,
And it's
that's
like,
later
okay,
'60s, but yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, also in the '60s, you got like Elvis movies and shit, and I don't, not a fan.
Him being a kung fu artist on the beach, that didn't hold weight for you?
No, no, it didn't.
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting. So, out of all those decades, do you have a favorite?
Um, I'd say two favorite decades:
Okay. Sweet.
the '50s, late '40s to mid to late '50s. So into
Yeah,
there,
so 40s, 50s.
'40s, '50s, and then
Is there
the silent film
anything
era,
is there anything you
like the
love from
'20s.
those decades that has to compete with anything that came before? A favorite movie from the 30s or 20s or the 10s that you're like, oh, that movie's better. Anything,
No,
or
not
is that whole decade is like, no, we're still figuring it out.
well. The silent film era is more just I have an appreciation for the beginnings of an art form and the way it
And when was
transforms.
Nosferatu again?
22,
That seems
22.
like the
Yeah,
benchmark, right?
yeah,
Like that old ass shit that you have to respect for what it's establishing.
yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't necessarily watch it because it's narratively satisfying. It's what it means to film.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm committed to watching some of your favorite 40s and 50s films.
Sounds good, man.
And yes, I will try not to judge too harshly.
There's some good ones. I think you'll be surprised. A lot of people can't get over like, oh, it's in black and white. I don't like it.
Those
I don't
people
know. I
are
don't
the
get it.
uneducated populace.
Yep.
They are wrong and they're stupid. And start reading in black and white, stupid. That's my message to them.
Yep. Then we could
And
go on all day
I
about
didn't mean
60s
to
film.
like start like end it on such a dark,
No, no.
but it's like no, you're dumb. Learn more. Which I'm trying to do. That's why I wanted you to talk about these decades of film. I knew you knew more. So
Hmm.
weird. I wanted to talk to a person who knew more about a thing than me.
I just, yeah, I appreciate all of film. Some more than others, but
I
yeah.
don't like old movies, but I want to be convinced. I want to believe. Like, yeah, I know this is the crux of like what it's all built on. I want to want it. And I'm excited about our attempts at that. But I think this was a good overview of the decades that I consistently ignore. And I appreciate you.
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, I'm
It's,
gonna. Oh, oh,
yeah,
oh.
yeah. I was just gonna say it's highly underappreciated now, and I think the the people who appreciate, from the '50s and before are, just film students and everybody else that is dying off now. Old people and film students. Only people who like these older movies, and then me, who just sits and watches everything,
Well,
voraciously consumes film.
well, and I'm a firm believer that um, some of that shit is dying out. People that remember what the 40s were like,
Yeah,
whether it was through film or art or music or whatever, and you need to preserve that knowledge. You need to educate yourself on your history.
yeah.
It doesn't completely define your future, but understanding the past can help you design the future better, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, even if I'm like, man, 40s don't speak to me every time I try, I still need to keep trying, I think.
Have you seen anything from there, from like the 40s,
I
like
couldn't tell
and
you
50s?
what. I couldn't tell you what.
Citizen Kane,
No.
Casablanca,
Yes.
none of it.
Yes,
You've seen the
Casablanca.
Disney movies though.
I've seen
Those,
Disney and Casablanca.
like
Casablanca was
Bambi's
like, other than
Fantasia.
them singing at the Nazis, was like, meh. That's how I felt. I'm sorry. I was just like, yeah, they sang in the Nazis. That was a great scene. That maybe should have been the whole thing. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's like, because people love that movie so much. And I was like, eh.
I don't know if people. I guess there are people who do love it, but
It's
it's more
considered
of
one
like
of the
I
best
respect.
films ever made by
Yeah,
some
I
people.
I respect that movie.
I respect it too, but I'm like, I don't think I ever want to watch it again.
Yeah,
I will watch that Nazi scene though, singing the Nazis out of the bar over and over. Like, that's a great scene. And I feel like that might be the crux of why people love it so much. But I could be
well,
wrong.
I
And
know
like,
there's
well, the ending, like,
yeah.
the two of us don't want to mount up to a hell of beans in this world, but, meh. Like, yeah, I get it. That meant something back then.
I know there's filmmakers that you like that got their start in the 50s,
No,
like
yeah, like,
Kubrick,
no,
Kubrick,
exactly. Kubrick
and
and fucking Good David Dick. Yeah. What's his
I love
face?
Hitchcock too. I
Hitchcock, yeah,
love
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock.
Good David Dick. No, so let's start there. Let's start old Kubrick. Old, um, man. Sorry, I apologize. Uh, Kubrick. Good evening. That guy.
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock. God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Let's start there. There's a
Oh,
bunch.
absolutely.
I've never seen
I could eat.
Vertigo. I've never seen The Killing. Like, all that. And then we can
Yeah,
branch out.
for sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording, and I think this was delicious. And I'm going to use it as my podcast for this week.
Okay.
And yeah, good stuff, buddy. I'm going to unwind for the evening, even though I should have unwinded way earlier.
Sounds good.
All right. Peace, buddy. Thank you for listening to The Jacob Wayne Show. If you would like to contact us, please write us at fakoshka@gmail.com. That is FAKOSHKA@gmail.com. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Simply search The Jacob Wayne Show and it should pop right up. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. Please write us. It helps add content to the show and makes the show even better for you, the listener. Thanks for tuning in.